Welcome to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety, where we talk about the real issues out on the road, focus on safe driving, and learn industry best practices from your hosts Kenny Ray, Mike Bohan, and Jim Seibert, in the hopes that by driving the line, we get more drivers home safe and sound. This podcast was made possible by Marsh McLennan Agency.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Driving the Line. This podcast, if you're new to our podcast, we want to welcome you. We are dedicated to talking about the trucking industry with specific focus on safety. And our topic today, we're coming up on the kind of the end of the summer. And one thing that's fixing to happen just around the corner is that school's fixing to crank back up across our country. And so along with Mike Bohan and Jim Seibert, this is Kenny Ray, and we're going to share with y'all some thoughts today about school safety. And again, we are a podcast that's dedicated to the trucking industry. So the things we talk about are always in relationship to professional truck drivers and trucking companies, because that's primarily who our listeners are. And so, we're going to remind our drivers, our professional drivers that are out on the road, some thoughts about being around schools and school zones and school buses. And then many of our listeners are also parents and grandparents. And we want to talk to you about just some things you can take home and talk to your kids and your grandkids about being safe when they're going to and from school and when they're around school. I want to share with y'all a personal story. My co-hosts know, but many of you may not. Before I became a Texas State Trooper, I used to be a school teacher. I was a high school ag teacher. I taught vocational agriculture, and I also was a football and a basketball coach. And this is back in the 80s, the 1980s. And let's clarify that. And so back then, every Texas ag teacher and every Texas coach you had to get a bus driver's license, because we either hauled FFA kids around to various functions, or we were hauling football teams or basketball teams to out of town games. And so I've driven a school bus. I was raised, all three of us are country boys. We all of us grew up in rural areas. Until I got old enough to drive, I rode a school bus. So I've both been on a school bus and have driven school buses. But we want to talk a little bit about school bus safety. And it's really from two sides of the coin. One is safety if you're on the bus, and the other is safety if you're around the bus. And that's normally approaching or not approach, or getting on or getting off the bus as children. And for our truck drivers that are listening, how you respond and how you react when you encounter a school bus on a highway. First of all, our school buses across the nation are actually very, very safe. There are millions, literally millions of school children that are transported every single day on school buses in our country. And yet, although the number I'm fixing to share with you is too high, it's amazingly low in respect to the number of kids that ride buses. From 2012 up until 2020, an 8-year span, we've only had 113 fatalities involving buses. 52 of those were the driver. So the bus was involved in a crash and the driver of the bus was killed. 61% or 61 of those 113 fatalities were passengers. That's not always just children. A lot of times there's coaches that are riding the bus or chaperones if they're on some sort of trip. But a relatively low number. And what that tells those of us that are in the safety world is that bus safety is good nationwide. We want that number to be zero, but it is very, very low. And just, the two worst bus incidents that have ever occurred in our country, one goes all the way back to 1958 in the state of Kentucky. A school bus was involved in a crash with a commercial motor vehicle. And of all things, the bus went off the road and into a river, and the driver and 25 kids drowned as a result of that. And then in my home state, in Texas, in 1989, again, a school bus involved in a crash with a commercial motor vehicle, This was down in South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. The bus went off the road and went into a caliche pit, which is if you're not familiar with that term, it's like a sand and gravel pit. It's been dug out, it's been mined, if you will. And whenever it rains, those pits fill up with water, and 21 kids drowned. It's ironic. The two worst school bus incidents in our country both resulted in the bus going into a body of water and kids drowning because they couldn't get out of the buses. Something personal for me. When I was a young school teacher, right when I first started, I had a peer of mine, and Michael, in our last podcast, you talked about a gentleman that was a role model for you in the inspection world. I had one when I was an ag teacher, the ag teacher at Bryan High School in Bryan, Texas, Mr. Frank Metzer, Texas ag teacher, highly respected, highly revered, tons and tons of awards for his teaching ability. He had a little boy named Kirk, a little son, and Kirk would ride home with his dad every day after school because his dad was a school teacher. But all of Kirk's friends rode the bus. And one day, Kirk just begged his daddy, "Daddy, can I ride the bus and you just follow me and I'll get off at the house?" And his dad agreed and let him ride the school bus. And Mr. Metzer went up and talked to the driver and said, "I know you don't normally stop at our house, but you know where we live. Stop at the house and let Kirk off." And Mr. Metzer was following the bus home, and it stopped in front of his house, 2-lane farm market road in Texas. And all the way home, his little boy had been in the back of the bus waving at his daddy out the back window. And the bus stopped, had the red lights on, had the stop sign out. And his little boy got off the bus and started across the road to the house. And y'all know what's fixing to happen. An oncoming car didn't stop and hit his little boy and killed him right in front of his daddy. And, the horror, and Mr. Metzer told me, he said, every night when I go to sleep, he said, I see that tape just plays over and over and over in my mind. And I share that story just to let you know how important it is for us when we're operating around school buses. So the bus safety itself, very, very safe for the kids riding. So the parents and the grandparents listening to this podcast, if your kids or your grandkids ride school buses, you can know that is an extremely safe way for those children to travel. We kind of have two sizes of school buses. We have the little bitty small ones that, small like a basketball team or a debate team or a choir or something may use. Those, and they're rated by weight. The ones that are less than 10,000 pounds, they're treated just like an automobile. They have seat belts and lap belts, and the kids are required to use them. Buses that are over 10,000 pounds, and that's our big school buses, they are designed to where that they're what's called compartmentalized. And that is, the seats are relatively close together. If you're an adult and have ever got on a school bus, you'd sit and say, golly, these seats are close together. That's by design. And the backs of the seats are now padded. They didn't be when I was a kid. They were just metal on the back, but they're all padded now. And the thought behind that is it's actually safe because you're basically putting a kid inside a padded pod. And we know from research that's relatively safe. So I just want to leave the parents and the grandparents that are listening to this with the thought that if your children ride a school bus, once they get on the bus, they actually are in an extremely safe environment. The biggest danger, and I mentioned it earlier, is being around the bus, as the story of my ag teacher friend exemplifies. It's getting on and off the bus. When children are in the morning, a lot of times they're still sleepy. They don't want it. And sometimes, depending on the time of the year, they're standing out on the side of the road. It's still dark. Some pointers to give your kids: tell them that don't stand right up next to that road. If they're small children, we'd like them to be at least 6 feet back from the edge of the highway. So tell them that's 3 giant steps. Make a game out of it. Tell them when y'all get down to the bus stop, I want you to take 3 giant steps away from the road, and that's as close as you stand to that bus until the bus driver opens the door and tells you to get on. And a huge danger when kids are getting on and off buses is crossing the highway, running across the roadway. And for our drivers that are listening today, I know y'all know, but when you see the yellow lights come on a school bus, just know that driver is getting ready to stop. He or she's fixing to stop. And that means that you get ready to stop as well. And then when the red lights come on, it's mandatory stop. There is never an excuse to pass a school bus when the red lights are on. I'm going to close with one other a personal story. It's kind of humorous in a way, but and then I want to share, get the thoughts from you two guys. But when I was a young state trooper in the Texas Highway Patrol, every year about this time when school would start, and again, I worked a very rural part of the state. We had small little country schools, but the superintendents from the various schools would call over to our Texas Highway Patrol office and ask the sergeant, can you have a trooper one day come and follow some of our buses because people are passing them when the lights are out. So we would get assigned as troopers, we'd get assigned to go and follow school buses. And it was always funny because we'd ask, well, what time do the drivers get to the bus barn? And normally some of them, it's even 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And so we wanted to be there to follow them from the time they left the bus barn. So, we'd come walking in, and the transportation director of the school, he might have all of his drivers in there, a small school, maybe 5 or 6 people, and a state trooper comes walking in there at 5:30 in the morning, and they all kind of tighten up a little bit. And we would always ask, which route is which one of y'all's having problems with people passing your bus? And at that point, none of them wanted to raise their hand because they knew that Texas Highway Patrol car was fixing to tuck in behind them and follow them on the whole route. But invariably, somebody would say, it's me. And so I'd tell them, I said, well, I'm going to get right up behind your bus so that people coming, it's normally people that are approaching them are the ones that they don't have a lot of problem with people coming around them from behind. It's people they're meeting on the road. And so I'd tuck right up behind them. I'd follow them out of the bus barn. And invariably, I never, ever, not a single time, no exaggeration, guys, I never, ever worked that assignment, not once, that I did not at least catch one person violating that. And you can imagine that's just one bus out of thousands that are running across our country. And, one thing I want to share with drivers, and I will be done with this, there is zero tolerance in the law enforcement community for that. You get caught passing a school bus, it don't matter who you are, it don't matter what your emergency is. You pass a school bus when those red lights are on and a police officer sees you, I can promise you're getting a ticket. You are absolutely getting a ticket. And for a professional truck driver, that is a kiss of death to get a moving violation like that. Okay. So Mike, Jim, as little boys, did y'all ride the school bus? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I absolutely did. I was lucky enough to where our bus stop was at. I was the last one to get picked up in the morning and the first one off in the afternoon. Man, it was perfect because I didn't have to spend much time on the bus. I was always the least amount of time on the bus possible. And I remember when my older brother got his license, it was I didn't get to go with him every day, but when I got to ride to school with my older brother, that was nice to finally graduate up and get off the bus. But no, it was kind of one of those things. And I had memories that I'd still be in the house and I'd see the bus go by and miss the school bus and have to call my mom to come get me and take me to school. And then I'd have to get a talking to because I wasn't taking care of my time management and I didn't make it to the bus stop. But, yeah, a lot of good memories riding the bus. But I wanted to follow up on a couple of things you had mentioned there, Ken. And you said that when the red light comes out, it's a mandatory stop. We know that. And I just wanted to say there is not a state in the United States that doesn't have a law that prohibits passing a vehicle, a school bus, when that stop arm is out. I mean, every state is going to have a law against that, and there's just no way around it. And it's for a very good reason. So just know that. Go to if you've got a question on a specific state, go to the Highway Patrol's website of that state. They'll have the information on there. I know Missouri does, and some of our surrounding states do as well. But for some specifics on how they enforce that law, but just be extra careful when you see those stop arms come out. The other thing that you had mentioned was talking about having those kids step off the road. I actually have a video that I pulled off YouTube that I use a lot in some of my training sessions where we're talking about speed management and space management, following distance, things like that. And the video, you see a dash camera inside a school bus, and the school bus pulls up and it stops, and there's 2 or 3 seconds that elapse, and then all of a sudden a truck tractor and a grain trailer, semi-trailer, go flying by the right side of the bus. Now, to set up the scene, this is a 2-lane road, kind of a blacktop country road looking road. And there's vehicles coming the other way. School buses stopped in this lane. There's vehicles coming towards them. And then they stop to pick up a kid. Well, they slow the video down. And as you notice that that tractor going by the right side of that school bus, passing them on the right, there's a little girl standing in the driveway that truck just barely misses.
Wow.
And so as I'm talking to the drivers, I say, so, okay, what were our options? Well, you never go left because there's oncoming traffic. He'd had a head-on collision. Well, he's certainly not going to hit the back of the school bus. So he took the safe option and went right, because obviously his speed was an issue. Maybe his following distance was an issue. Maybe distraction was an issue. So he thought he took the best option, the safest option, to go right. And it almost caused that little girl to lose her life. I mean, he just barely misses her. So it's so important as we're talking about, and I know we've got some other topics we want to talk about when we're talking about school bus safety. As you guys are out there, especially during the school year, make sure you keep your eyes up and focus down the road. And if you've got a bus in front of you, know that thing's going to stop, and make sure that you're not distracted, that your speed's right. Because it's, these kids, there's nothing more important to us than our kids. And we certainly don't want to be the cause of anybody getting hurt or killed because of our negligence. So,
yeah.
One of the other things we wanted to talk about today, I know is Jim and Kenny and I were kind of getting together, is safety around the schools as well. And there's going to be some similar issues with safety around school zones, the schools, things like that. I know in the town we live in here, all of our schools, elementary through high school, are kind of all on the same campus. So when school lets out, it is a madhouse up around the schools, because you've got all the buses coming in there to get all the schools, the kids that are going to ride buses. You got all of them, picking up kids. You've got all of the parents showing up that are going to pick up their kids. And then you've got all the kids that are walking, all the kids that are riding their bikes. So it's just, it's extremely busy up there. And last year, there was a young boy in our school, and luckily, it was not a fatality. It was not, he was injured a little bit, but he was coming across the crosswalk. Well, the traffic is so busy up there, the lane that he was closest to him was stopped. So he darted out in between 2 cars and was going to try to get across the crosswalk. Well, the traffic coming from the other direction was still moving, and he was hit by a car. Luckily, they weren't moving very fast, and he wasn't injured terribly bad, but it was one of those issues where, he was a little kid. He wasn't a high school kid. He was a grade school kid. The cars coming the other way could not see him behind the other vehicle. He darted out across the crosswalk, and unfortunately, that other vehicle was probably moving a little too fast for the school zone. And, that was something where that's a scary situation to be in, but it happened, half a mile from my house. I mean, it was a scary situation for that mother and that family. But luckily that young man was okay. But it's just something that when you think about being around those school zones, the first thing that comes to my mind is you got to slow down when you think you've slowed down enough, slow down some more.
Absolutely. Because
there's just, you don't know where kids are going to come out of. And I know it maybe not with a kindergartner coming across the road, but you never know. I see it at the university here in our town. We've got an issue with distracted driving, but we've got an issue with distracted walking. I mean, there's kids now that are on their cell phones, and they'll walk right out in front of a car and not even realize they're in trouble, that there's a car coming. So we've got to take extra care to slow way down, to give us time to react if there is somebody there's a pedestrian that's maybe not paying attention, or maybe they were going to try to get across the street and beat some traffic. Let's not play that game. Let's just slow down and be as safe as we possibly can. So some of the other things we need to look at, and you can get on National Safety Council's website. There's a lot of good information on here you can share with your drivers, share with your companies, really with anybody that's going to be driving around a school zone. But when you're when you're driving through a school zone, obviously we're going to see those signs. Especially, I see them a lot. In the small towns you come through, because a lot of bigger towns, trucks may not be going through school zones. But if you're going through a small town and the school's on the highway, you're going to see these signs flashing. It says, that there's a reduced speed limit during school hours, or when children are present, something like that. So pay attention to that. If you see those flashing signs and it's telling you to slow down, if it tells you to get down to 20 mile an hour, you get down below that. But as you're coming up through there, if you've got a crosswalk, make sure that you're stopping and yielding to any pedestrians. They would have the right of way. If there's a patrol officer there or crossing guard holding up a stop sign, stop at those places. Make sure that you're yielding and stopping when you've got those folks there. Just take extra care when you're near a school, because even if it's not right near the school's campus, there's going to be kids walking and biking to, where they live within a few miles of that school. So just know, if it's 3:00 in the afternoon, you're going to have kids out on the roads, out on the sidewalks, that kind of thing. So take extra care there. One of the things that the National Safety Council puts on their website that says, don't rev your engine or honk your horn or use a jake brake to try to scare a pedestrian. Even if you think they're going to walk out in front of you or something like that, if they're standing on the side of the road, the last thing you want to do is scare them, because their first reaction may be to just take off running, and they might run in front of a vehicle, and we certainly don't want that. Never pass a vehicle stopped for pedestrians. So if you've got coming up to a crosswalk and somebody stopped for some pedestrians coming across the road, obviously you're going to want to stop behind that vehicle. They're stopped for a reason, so we need to stop behind them. There's nothing so important that we need to try to get around that car and make up some time and put somebody in harm's way because we wanted to get around that vehicle. Anybody that's in a crosswalk, obviously we're going to yield to them. We're going to stop, give them the right of way. As Kenny said, with the school bus conversation, there's just going to be no excuse if you hit a pedestrian in a crosswalk or you cause an accident in a school zone because you were going too fast or you weren't paying attention, something like that. There's just no excuse for that, and it's not going to go well for you. So you want to make sure that you're highly alert, that you've slowed your speed way down, and that you're just using caution at every turn, because there's going to be a lot of folks around there trying to get home from school. And it's not just the school kids. I mean, I brought up our university as well. When we go, that's kind of a different topic, because I know we're talking about, middle school, grade school, high school kids. But I know our university here in town, there's kids. I mean, that's how they get to class. That's how they get around everywhere they walk. And there's classes letting out at different times throughout the day. And you really have to, you have to be careful. You have to watch what you're doing when you drive through campus, because, unfortunately, kids don't always use crosswalks. They'll cut across in the middle of the street, things like that. And you just got to be aware when you're around a school and there's the potential for a child or a young person walking out in front of you when you're driving through that zone. So just be extra careful there. It's so important for us to be alert and to protect those kids as they're trying to get home from school.
Mike, and I know Jim wants to talk about teen drivers because it's very near and dear to his heart right now. But you mentioned about watching for the school zone signs, and most of the time for reduced speed, they'll have the flashing yellow lights that go along with that. But and I love it, especially the part you mentioned about going through a small town or a rural community. The school might be right there next to the highway. We have hundreds of towns in Texas that are exactly like that. The school's not tucked off somewhere. It's sitting on the edge of a 2-lane or a 4-lane highway. And a lot of times you'll have drivers, professional truck drivers from out of state that may not be familiar with the area, and they're over the road driver and they're passing through. It's critical that they watch the signs, not only for speed, but oftentimes here in Texas, we have some really weird rules around schools. Absolute zero cell phone use. If you're caught using a cell phone, it doesn't matter. No cell phone use in school zones, period. So you can imagine a driver that's legally on a Bluetooth device and he's coming into a small community during a school zone. Absolute against the law for him to be on a cell phone. Another one, sometimes in some of our small communities, roads that are normally two double travel direction will become one lane roads during school time. It may be 7:15 to 7:45 a.m., but that road becomes a one-way road. You can only travel one direction. So it's critical to read those signs and to know what's going on. And I'm going to yield to Jim, but I want to add one more comment. You know, we normally think of school about 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., but at least here in Texas, and I'm guessing it's going to be true for Oklahoma and Missouri as well, football, high school football borders on being a religion in my state. And so everybody needs to be aware Friday nights and oftentimes Thursday night. Thursday night, you'll have the junior high and the freshmen and the JV playing, and then varsity plays on Friday night. But you go in any small town in Texas in the fall on a Friday night, and you don't have to worry about where the football stadium is because you can see the lights from 15 miles away because they're on. And so drivers need to know that people are going to and from a football game, and you got school buses traveling, the out-of-town team, whatever that is. They brought their football team, they brought their band, they brought their cheerleaders and their pep squad and all that. And so on Friday night, you can have just as much vehicular traffic around a school as you can oftentimes during the school day itself. And again, we're wrapping up the summer and coming up on the start of the school year. And a lot of times that's a rite of passage for some kids. I remember the summer between my sophomore and junior year in high school is when I got my full-fledged driver's license. And what a rite of passage that was. And I had a 65 Chevrolet pickup, and I thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And, I realize looking back now how stupid I really was as a kid. And so, Jim, mine and Mike's kids are grown. You've still got school-age kids. Talk to us as a dad about these high school kids that are getting their driver's license over the summer.
I think that we need to start a petition for distracted pedestrian crossings. Right? We've got distracted driver training. We've got the no cell phone. We should have something for distracted pedestrians. When I see people walking down the road, I'm close to a university town. We're there almost every day. And you've got people walking around with their head in their phone. You got people walking around with earmuffs in at busy intersection. They're listening to our podcast and they're really focused on it, not paying attention to the crossing. So that, and we got this new thing going on that I'm extremely fortunate that I didn't have it when I was a kid because I'd had a lot more broken bones. But we got these electronic scooters and bicycles all over the place now. And they're almost in every mid-sized city, definitely every college town. And those electric scooter riders, they don't follow pedestrian laws. They don't even follow traffic laws. They're zipping in and out, and it adds a whole new dynamic to being aware as a vehicle operator. So moving into beginning permit drivers, brand new full-blown driver's license. And Kenny, I had a 1984 Dodge Ram, and I was the cat's meow. You guys mentioned about riding the school bus. I was never that fortunate to have those types of experiences. I was homeschooled by my mom, but mostly my sister, because she was overqualified for the position. And then I turned out right about 5th and 6th grade. We went to a small Christian country school where my sister was older than me, and she was driving a manual transmission 1988 Ford Tempo that was brown, and it operated about the same color that it was. So anyways, I didn't get the fortune until I started playing some high school and junior high sports, and that was a fun experience for me. So, I mentioned to you guys that some states are starting to pass the 14-year-old school permit. If you live on a rural road and you can avoid the highways, you can get a school permit. And that's kind of what it was like when I was growing up. We had farm kids that could get a farmer's permit. I believe it was like the age of 12. And then they could get a school permit at the age of 14. And then after school, they just drive all over town. And we're coming into a new school year, and many of these kids, compared to when we were growing up, have way less driving experience by the time they get to their driver's ed course. And many schools aren't even offering driver's ed anymore. And we see these vehicles on the road say, please be patient, student driver. And so the exposure to operating a vehicle in a controlled and safe environment is a lot less than what it used to be. And it's a lot less acceptable than what it used to be when we were growing up. And so less experience, putting behind vehicles that are hopefully better maintained and better technology wise, with safety equipment on board. But the roads have faster speed limits than they did when we were growing up. And so things are moving faster. We've got less experience on the road. We've got many, many school activities. And just like what you were talking about, we've got the school buses and the school bus safety, and we've got the school zone. And we've got those items that we're focused on our trucking listeners. And now we're adding another aspect where inexperienced drivers operating in those areas and around those school buses that you are also going to encounter. So you might be doing the right thing, pulling up behind a school bus and hitting your brake, or coming on the oncoming traffic side and hitting your brake. But now we're going to add that young driver around that you're also watching out for. So just wanted to highlight that one piece there, and think about what it was like when you were a beginner driver. Everything seems that it's coming so fast, and now those speeds, we know what to look out for. We know what could be coming out of a yard somewhere, and we know it'll be looking out for pedestrians. But now these other folks, they may not. Their reaction time could be different than ours, and it's just something to be aware of. And Mike, Kenny, what do you guys think about that? Any extra points?
I love the fact that you kind of sum that up, because, our audience is the trucking industry. So for just a moment, let's pretend that 100% of the people listening to this podcast are professional drivers. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't get anything else out of this podcast, just realize that as school starts back this fall, that you are going to be encountering school buses. You're going to be encountering kids around schools in school zones, and you're going to be encountering brand spanking new teenage drivers that are extremely inexperienced, although they probably have a confidence level that's way exceeds their skill level. And you as a professional driver just need to be aware, hey, when I'm around a school, when I'm in a school zone, if I'm going through a small rural town, I just need to be at the top of my game. I need to be the professional truck driver that I am, and just manage my space, my speed, to where no matter what I encounter on that road, I'll be able to safely handle it. So I love the way that you sum that up. So again, guys, let's any parting thoughts from either one of y'all, and then we'll wrap up and close this particular podcast as we talk about school safety. Mike, anything you want to add?
Well, you guys had shared what your vehicles were when you started driving. So I was going to, so my first car that wasn't me driving my parents' car was a 1981 Buick Regal, had a sunroof. I mean, it's a white, it was a beautiful car. Loved that car. And you talk about thinking I was something special. Ride around with a sunroof open when you're 16. It was something special. My folks have still got a picture of me the first day I took off with that thing. I'm backing out of the driveway and I'm giving a big thumbs up. And I looked at that picture going, what my parents must have been thinking when I was backing out of that drive, because, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's right. Jim, anything?
No, I just tell you what, as a father of a 14 and a 10-year-old, and my kids do ride the school bus, sometimes in the morning, but every day on the way home. I appreciate knowing that we've got professional drivers out there and those that care. You know, we are called to protect the widows and to protect the orphans and protect the kids. And this is one of those things where we take it serious and we give them a chance.
Amen, brother. Folks, thank y'all for joining us. We never take for granted our listening audience on Driving the Line. We're grateful for each and every one of you. We encourage you to share this freely, openly. For the safety directors that are on here, use anything we share with you, man. Use it at safety meetings, driver meetings, owners of companies. Some of y'all have internal communication networks for your drivers. We always love for you to share anything we share with y'all. And so, again, be careful, be safe around school zones, around school buses, and knowing that in all of these little country towns that y'all cross through across our nation, that you've got brand new licensed drivers that are legally on the road but have basically no experience, and just be careful operating around them. So for my two co-workers, Mike Bohan and Jim Seibert, this is Kenny Ray. Thank you again for joining us on this episode of Driving the Line. And remember, we are the trucking podcast that is always in the pursuit of safety. We'll catch y'all next time. Thank you again.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Driving the Line, the Pursuit of Safety. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and thank you for listening. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Driving the Line, the Pursuit of Safety on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other app you're using. You can also follow Marsh McLennan Agency on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Until next time, thanks again for listening. Drive safely, everyone.